In August 1590, an English ship dropped anchor off the coast of modern-day North Carolina. The crew waded ashore looking to resupply 115 settlers. Instead, they found a completely intact, heavily fortified village. There were no signs of a struggle, no panic, and no people. They scoured the island for physical remains, but found no blood and no freshly dug graves. The only thing left behind was a single word carved into a wooden post: Croatoan. Over 4 centuries later, historians, archaeologists, and cryptographers are still arguing over what that carving actually meant and where those families went. Looking at this early map of the Americas, you can trace the massive distance these settlers traveled from Europe to the Carolina coast. Today, we trace that route to investigate the failed voyages, stranded colonists, and modern archaeological digs attempting to crack the case. This single abandoned island set a precedent for every English attempt that followed. 400 years later, the absence of a confirmed ending continues to divide researchers. To understand how a whole colony vanishes, we have to rewind to the 1580s. England was in a sprint against Spain to claim permanent territory across the Atlantic, operating under a royal charter granted to Sir Walter Raleigh. Raleigh appointed an artist and mapmaker named John White to govern the new settlement. White led 115 men, women, and children to Roanoke Island. Among them was his own pregnant daughter, who soon gave birth to Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas. Her arrival turned a rugged expedition into a highly vulnerable family settlement. Those first few weeks held promise. The settlers rebuilt an abandoned fort from a previous expedition and cautiously opened trade with the nearby native tribes. But the optimism was short-lived. The previous English expedition years earlier had ended in a skirmish that left a Socotan chief dead, a memory the local people hadn't forgotten. As tensions rose, the colony's food and supplies began running dangerously low. Isolated and desperate, the settlers made a calculated risk. They convinced Governor White to sail back to England to secure reinforcements. By doing so, they tied their entire survival to a single man making a swift return across a hostile ocean. White's return trip collided with a massive global conflict. Almost as soon as he reached Europe, the Anglo-Spanish War erupted, and the Spanish Armada sailed to invade England. Faced with an imminent invasion, Queen Elizabeth ordered every seaworthy English ship into military service. The Crown seized the very vessels White had secured for his supply run. He was now effectively trapped in Europe. It took 3 agonizing years before White could finally secure passage back to Roanoke Island in August 1590. Inside the fort, the scene suggested a deliberate move. The houses were dismantled, not burned or broken, and the colonists had not carved a Maltese cross, the signal they had agreed to leave if they were in danger. White wanted to follow the Croatoan carving to a nearby island, but a massive incoming storm forced his nervous crew to flee back to England. Global war delayed the rescue, and localized weather ended it, permanently sealing off our view of the colony's final days. One theory suggests the colonists followed the carving to Hatteras Island. If they integrated with the local population there, they would have eventually adopted the customs and diet of their neighbors. The problem was that, historically, no one could find any 16th century English artifacts on that island to prove it. Another theory focuses on the environment. This line chart plots regional tree ring data over 1,000 years, tracking historical weather. There's a severe dip in the 1580s, marking the worst drought in 8 centuries. That extreme drought points to a collapse driven by famine, but starvation leaves behind bodies. Without a single skeleton ever recovered, an environmental crisis alone cannot fully explain a complete vanishing act. A third theory suggests an attack by the powerful Powhatan Confederacy to the north. Yet archaeologists have never unearthed a battlefield, discarded weapons, or a mass grave that would verify a violent end. In the 1930s, researchers thought they found physical proof when a series of engraved rocks, known as the Dare Stones, were discovered. They supposedly detailed the deaths of the colonists. However, modern analysis proved nearly all of them to be elaborate hoaxes. Centuries of speculation has reached similar dead ends. Each possibility relies on plausible narratives, but consistently fails to produce the hard, verifiable physical proof required to confirm the colony's location. That lack of evidence finally began to change in the 2010s. The First Colony Foundation launched new, targeted excavations inland at a location dubbed Site X, as well as south on Hatteras Island. Digging deep into the soil, researchers uncovered a specific layer containing English-made pottery, fragments of 16th-century firearms, and a writing slate. Crucially, these items were found directly alongside Native American artifacts from the exact same time period. Finding these mixed-layer items offers the strongest physical backing we have ever had for White's original theory. It provides tangible data that at least some English settlers integrated with the local indigenous population. In those final weeks, the settlers were making choices that would dictate the survival of their children. They were deciding whether to wait in a failing fort or trust a neighboring tribe enough to walk away from their only link to England. Modern archaeology brings us incredibly close to the mechanics of how these people survived their final months. Yet the definitive fate of the Roanoke settlers remains out of reach. It leaves us to wonder, if you were John White, staring at that empty shore, what would you have chosen to believe?